Hi, and welcome to the Lowdown on Low Code. My name is Rick Greenwald. I work for Analysis.Tech, and I'm here with my colleague, John Rymer, really the guy who came up with the term low code oh so many years ago. And we're very pleased and privileged today to have the co-host of the It's All About Data podcast, or as I call it, It's About Data, Damnit. Tony Baer from DB Insights and Matt Housley from Halfpipe.
Hey, Rick, thanks
And
for having us.
Thank
No
you.
problem at all. Just so you know, John and I did a couple of podcasts with Tony on the It's About Data podcast a few weeks ago, which we had a lot of fun doing, and we think they're a lot of fun to listen to if you want to go back and check those out. But Matt, Tony, it's great to have you here. I feel like I have my tribe here, my data tribe, not just the developer tribe as before. And I want to start out by looking at that issue because it's funny that I've been working with data for decades, as I know you guys have also. And I'd just like to get your comments on your feelings about how developers focus on application development and data folk focus on data and how it works and how it's used, how those guys interact, the pluses and the minuses of that relationship in the world we live in now, and how that relates to low code.
I'll take it. I'll take this one. I was actually thinking about this as I was driving my car this morning. And there's a real tension sometimes between the focus on features in software and the focus on quality. So things like data quality, reliability, simplicity. So for example, I would really like it in my car. I like the touchscreen actually, but I would really like it if I didn't have to hit the screen 3 times to get the touchscreen to turn on my phone to connect, right? And what does this have to do with data? Well, I think a lot of data quality and reliability problems in software come down to not designing appropriate schemas and database design and these basic things. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Tony?
We'll put it this way, and this is kind of like as John said on when he was on our show, which is that as far as developers are concerned, just give me the data. I mean, schema to them is something that's kind of academic. It's just they need to get a certain answer, and they see having to navigate basically the subtleties of a relational database is probably, more akin to like having red tape. They just want to get the data. They want to get the apps out. And, even, what we've seen, especially, I think what's been a really interesting phenomenon was the growth of MongoDB, the explosive growth over the past decade of Mongo. And their whole mantra, and it really disturbed the heck out of me, was we need to get more apps out. Yeah, well, that's fine. It's nice to get apps out, but there was no focus on, well, how do we essentially kind of keep breadcrumb, trails of breadcrumbs here. It's like just get these apps out, and it's like technical debt. Well, what's that? So, and again, I'm looking at it from a data side standpoint. I'm sure developers have, and John, you are now in the minority, probably for a rare time in your podcast, so you be prepared to defend yourself. But essentially, I'm sure developers have similar gripes about the data folks because we're just standing in their way.
It's funny how you bring up MongoDB because the first conference I went to at my last job when I worked at Gartner was a MongoDB conference like 10 years ago. And I remember there were no fewer than 4 presentations on how to implement a schema in a schemaless database, So I think to some extent it's a matter of viewpoint, a lot of times. And by the way, the conference was divided up between people saying, oh, we'll just do whatever we want, developers, and data people saying, how am I ever going to put the guardrails up? Because I think sometimes I think about it as data is horizontal, serving multiple applications, and applications are vertical. And there's just a fundamental tension here, which has to be resolved. I mean, you live at the intersection between them.
Yeah. One of the ironies in Mongo is that I frequently see developers essentially creating ORM, object relational mappings with a bunch of joins and things in Mongo. It's completely wild.
Oh gosh.
But by the way, there's a better way to do that. But by the way, it's as people tell me and remind me all the time, it's been very successful. There have been really meaningful systems built with it in production, in enterprise. So, it's not that you have to do that, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
So thanks for inviting me. I actually thought of wearing a brown paper bag over my head to come into the conversation because I am the odd duck in this group. So this needs to be resolved. And Tony, you know, as you mentioned, you know, uh, essentially the two disciplines, the two groups have different incentives. Developers, the business is sitting on them. We need what we need. We need the automation we need. We need it when we need it. Move fast, you know, move fast, break things even. And certainly with the AI applications to application development, we're trying to turn the crank once again. On the other hand, really in the world of the horizontal resource of data, it's speed is the enemy. You really want to slow things down so that you can ensure integrity, manage costs, you know, support scalability, and all those other good things. So, I mean, first of all, do you agree? I mean, the view from the developers is you know, the data guys, the data architects are the ministry of no, and all they want to do is slow me down. Well, I can't do that. Is that a reasonable perspective, or is that in fact out of date?
That's interesting. I mean, what I've seen, I will tell you actually in practice, what I've seen is that developers want to develop high quality data, high quality, reliable code. They want to do things like refactor and do it right. They're constantly under pressure in many companies I've worked with from executives saying, do X, Y, and Z. And if they're not protected from those pressures, then that's what they have to do, right? Those are the incentives to keep your job, to get promoted, is just to keep delivering features. But if you have good leadership who will protect them and say, hey, we care about the data, we want this app to be reliable, we want it to be scalable, they will work on those back-end problems and build better data systems that way.
Look, this is the classic, basically short-term versus, long view.
Yes.
And the fact is that if management is not enlightened, they're going to say, we need these apps out there. We need to get this stuff done. We want that new feature on the website or on the mobile app. Just get it done. And the thing is that by the time that the problems come to bite you down the pike, well, chances are that exec has probably moved on. So in a way, there's a lot of parallels. For instance, how we look at, let's say, like investing. Do you invest in the short term and just get that result out, regardless of whether it's going to bankrupt the company, or are you looking for a long-term sustainability? So I think that's exactly what's going on here.
And the ironic thing, I think, is that when we talk about putting some of this stuff in data, it ends up being more efficient long term. No question about it. Both efficient to implement and even more so efficient to maintain and keep reacting to changing business conditions. But it's almost like developers are running so fast they can't afford to be efficient. And one of the things that I hope, and we talk about all the time at analysis.tech, is how do we bring people together to say we all do best if these work together, if we take what we can do in the database and have that spur productivity and efficiency in the development. And the possibility is there, but it's so hard to get people to kind of pick up their head and see that possibility.
Well, have you guys seen effective ways of bringing folks together? I mean, one idea that I think is kind of a gateway to a variety of new organizational ideas is the fusion team, where you've got business people. It usually was the main goal of a fusion team was rip down the wall between the tech professionals and the business pros, and allow and give them both responsibility for a successful outcome. But another variation on it is you bring in the security pros, you bring in the data pros, the data architects, you bring in any other, networking people or storage, if those are critical areas, and everybody works together. What other, I mean, that's one idea. What other ways have you seen of trying to bridge this gap and resolve it?
I mean, you've got DevOps, right, where you bring developers and ops together, very closely related to what you're talking about. You have sometimes it's called data ops, where again, the people doing the analytics work very directly with the developers. And what especially incentivizes that is if you have embedded analytics or consumption of data in the application layer, right? For example, if they're consuming a recommender, suddenly they have a really big incentive to get the data right because they want people to do whatever action, buy stuff or engage with the platform more. And that doesn't work if the data you're consuming is not of good quality. And you can't make it good quality if the exhaust coming out of the application is not high quality. So, but
all that digital exhaust.
yes.
It's really funny because I just get this sense of deja vu all over again, which is that what we talk about, John, Rick, this, and Matt, you know this as well. It's like back in the 1990s when we were all in diapers, we were talking about multifunction teams back then. And we saw it essentially with rapid application development. Wow, instead of this, this waterfall thing where we basically start here and eventually, and eventually we release this after about 5 years, is that we put little teams together, and we get these apps. And the idea with those teams was that these are very product focused teams. So the idea has been around, and when Agile came in, in the early, in the early 2000s, in the aughts, that kind of brought that idea, even further. Like these Scrum teams. The idea is that, maybe wasn't necessarily executed that way, but I think the original idea was that the way you move fastest is you get, maybe not, all the necessary players, but probably a minimum number, a representative, number of those players together. This is kind of like almost like the 2 pizza box rule, at Amazon. But the idea is we're supposed to get, someone reach the discipline. So the idea is not new. I think things have become more complicated. And against the backdrop of all this, though, I can't help but wondering, are we fighting yesterday's battles? And the reason why I asked that is because, with AI coming in and with vibe coding and with agents, I'm sure you guys are going to be getting to that, but I just can't help but thinking of that in the back of my mind. It's like, are we fighting yesterday's war?
Well, Tony, great lead into the next question I was going to have, because AI is everywhere, over everything. And I think to some extent AI is more on the developer side of the house than the data side of the house. But I'd really like to hear you guys' thoughts on how AI, and even more particularly Gen AI, is affecting the practice of data management and using data, and how that's going to have impact overall.
I think when it works well, it can have a very significant impact on data management. I think in the early days, say, which are only a couple of years ago, really, but 2023, say, it was kind of amazing, right? Like you could do text to SQL. It just turned out not to be very good. And since then, we've started putting some scaffolding in place to make this work better, text to SQL. And I think in general, when you have a tool that makes it easier to dig into the data to do exploration, that is an excellent tool also for basic things like data quality and data governance, right? Like you start to discover those data problems if you can dig deep into the data and find out what insights you have, but also what seems to be going wrong, and dig deeper into that. Like we talked to Dave Mariani from AtScale, and he was saying these days with their semantic layer, he can go into a customer and do a demo live on their data, and it will often generate some insights on the fly, which you could never do before. And that's the combination of Gen AI plus semantics. I don't know. Semantics are a big buzzword, but they do seem to be having a real impact on us right now. What do you think, Tony?
Matt, I was afraid you were going to bring up that S word. Let me rewind this back a little bit, because when you talk about the impact of AI on this, it's like, where do we start from which perspective? Is it AI? Where I was bringing it up before was like AI starting to generate code, and so therefore was it making team members obsolete? But it was also AI in terms of helping us to get to the data, and AI could also help us, introspect, or and organize the data and structure the data. So potentially, aside from, I'm going to divorce the questions now of vibe coding, away from this for the moment. But the fact is that I think, to me, I think probably if there's one sort of general rule I would like to see, is that we treat AI as a digital assistant that augments us, that multiplies us, that doesn't replace us. And so, the short answer is, in an ideal world, we will still have teams. Their reach will be scaled with AI, and hopefully AI could also help us with other kind of nagging parts of the legwork, like, are we opening some security holes here? Are there some potential privacy breaches? It's possible that AI could help us do all that. On the other hand, and this is getting back to where Matt was talking about semantics, and it's something that I believe this year is actually probably going to be playing a preeminent role with regard to AI, basically connected with data, is that semantic tiers, I think, are going to play a huge part and will help accentuate all this. But on the other hand, semantic tiers mean that you have to put in some legwork up front, a lot of that architectural work that we used to talk about.
It
So,
doesn't replace it. It requires it.
bingo.
Well, I want to congratulate you guys for talking about semantic layers without ever mentioning the O word, which nobody understands. I'm talking about ontology, of course.
I thought you were talking about object-oriented development.
That was when I was in diapers.
Oh,
That was back in the 90s when I was in diapers, Tony.
We're old enough. We're old enough.
Well, I want to do a quick commercial break here, guys, but just for a moment. For those of you listening or watching, this is the Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast devoted to all things low code. These days, that includes a lot of AI. This is what we're spending about 100% of our time on these days in our research. Lowdown on Low Code is brought to you by Analysis.tech, as Rick mentioned. I'm one of the principals here. Rick is another one of the principals here. We have Rob Koplowitz on board. We have Dave Marcus on board. We have Francis Carden on board. Each one of us has a particular specialty on a slice of the topic. Our research is available for the price of your email, giving us your email. Visit us at analysis.tech, have a look. And with that, we will return to our programming. And Rick, I was hoping I could shoot a question in on based on the last thing,
sure.
last
Go ahead.
discussion. So pretend that, with me, you don't have to pretend, but pretend that I am someone who is really focused on producing features and producing applications. And, my understanding of data is basically that, as you said, Tony, give me the data. Give me the data I need. Let me work with it. Give me the APIs. Let me work with it. I mean, you hear this all the time with folks talking about AI. What do I need to know about what can go wrong on the back end? Is it drift of the data quality behind the APIs I'm accessing? Is it my exhaust that is somehow polluting the horizontal resource that we all are depending on? For people like me who are scratching their heads a little bit, help me get smarter about that. Silence.
And you notice that basically when you asked us to help you get smarter, we all drew a pass because, John, we just wanted, how could we make you any smarter than you already are? Again, this really goes back to, put it this way. I'll just say that in a certain way, it kind of goes back to basics, which is, understanding all these architectural principles. But that's not an adequate answer today because, as I said, with AI kind of expanding the attack surface, it's just like what happened when we went to when we went from client server to end tier. All of a sudden, we had some new attack surfaces, and when you went into the cloud, new attack surfaces, and now you have AI and agents, new attack surfaces. There was this. Basically, I was reading about this, this agent that just got released today, kind of. But, sort of out in the wild, which basically, observes no bounds and shows that, and I'm not sure whether who was, and I forget the name of it. I just saw it a little bit earlier. It had a very catchy name. I think it was, QuickBot or Claude or Claudebot, but not Claude the way Anthropic spells Claude. I think it was like, CLEW.
CLEWED, yeah. Very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the fact is that you have to start looking. I hate to get real meta here, but you have to start, attacking this with the same discipline that you use when we do pharmaceutical research, which is looking at random drug interactions, because that's basically what happens when you start exposing all these different pieces with
Yeah.
all these movable parts, some which are deterministic and some which are not deterministic. So, sorry, folks, I've just dug ourselves into a hole, and I'm not sure, John, if I've made you any smarter.
Well, and to follow up on your original question, John, I think Tony brings up a very good point that has to do with agents, but also just software in general, right? Like when you establish databases, they need very tight access controls, and you need to carefully define what data can go where and where private data is allowed and where data has security implications. Because if you don't do that and it's free for all, even coders can really screw things up, right? Coders can cause data breaches by coding new features that access existing databases that have sensitive data and then exposing it through, I don't know, unclean SQL, for example, right? Like entry box, SQL injection that still exists. That's still going on now. And then you throw in what Tony has, these powerful agentic tools, which we're giving way, way too much access to systems, by the way. And it becomes even more dangerous. One version of this is Bezos's API mandate, right? Saying all data is behind APIs, no direct database access except for the owner of that database, and be very careful about what's exposed through that API. Now, that's one way to do it, but the general principle holds across the board. Like you have to be very careful about how data is structured and exposed to make sure that it's correct and safe as well. Rick, what are your thoughts on this? You're nodding along.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And frankly, it's leading to the next question I was going to ask you.
Okay.
One of the things which has been frustrating to me, and this has happened to me a lot in my career, especially when I was at Gartner, that I come up with this idea and I think like, I can't believe the world is so ignorant as to not know this. And then the more I think about it, like, no, actually they are. And one of my pet peeves was, I was going to ask this question in the manner of the old Colbert show, which is data governance, a great thing or the greatest thing? And coming back to when people talk about governance, they're only talking about security, which is important.
Yeah.
But I talk about data governance, which means how do you ensure the data is correct for your context? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all the my data you want because it's wrong anyways. Who cares? So I wanted to ask you your thoughts about data governance itself, because this seems to be something that a lot of people, it doesn't even cross. What do you mean the data is not right? Well, if data depends on context, and if you're not fully aware of the context, you're just throwing darts in the dark, like my office. Feelings about that, about data governance, how well it's known, how well it's not known, and the pluses and minuses of that, and the future, really.
Well, I think of data governance really is regulating how data is used. So I think, to me, in my head, in my mind, basically, context plays a supporting role there. I mean, I think context is all important in terms of how we use data. I don't see governance as being, context as being a governance function per se. But I think the context of how it's used, and that context means, that can, basically encompass was a type of task that's being done, who, who is involved with this, who's touching this, and who is allowed to access this, who is allowed to do this. And so, yes, part of it's security, but part of it is also, it's essentially, you know, the age old problem of essentially, you're regulating, basically, privileges, access rights. Um, but it's also knowing what are the bounds, because you might have permission to access a particular piece of data, but not to do a specific. You might even be allowed to do X, but not be allowed to do Y with it. So to me, governance really is about that. Context plays a supporting role. I think context, though, I don't see it as being a function. I don't see it as being one of the things you do with data governance. I think it's something which supports it.
Yeah, I've kind of expanded the term governance to include that, because whether data is correct or not, correct is not a simple term. I mean, correct only has meaning within context. So by putting in the governance saying these are more rules, except they're rules based on values of content, not just use of content.
Right. And I think one thing we need to talk about a lot more is the notion of data risk. And data risk is all over the place, and we've known that for decades. I think one problem we have in this industry is that the tech industry broadly provides a lot of career mobility. And that is great, right? It's great that someone with a college degree or even without a college degree can get into data science, can get into software engineering and build their career. But what you're often seeing is that people never get this additional training to say, here are the risks of data. That's why you get this like debacle that Zillow had a couple years ago, where they're running a data science model without understanding the risks and buying houses. And, the
Mhm.
company, I don't know if they almost went bankrupt, but they lost a lot of money doing that. Anyone who understands market dynamics could have told you that up front and told you about the risks. Or examples of social media networks basically fueling genocides. Anyone who understands social dynamics, sociology, could have told you that was a risk. But you have these untrained people coming into these companies with no background, no training, no understanding of risk. And I think both software engineers and data scientists, add in machine learning engineers, AI engineers, need a lot more of that training as they're growing in their careers. And that feeds back into data governance to say, this data is high risk and we need to be very careful with it. We need to be careful about what decisions we make with this and what consequences those could have for our business, but also for the world outside of our business, because those could be very serious.
Your
That's
description
a
calls to mind a comment I once read in New Yorker many years ago is, "You're not even wrong. You're not even close enough to be wrong," you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
that's a really great point, Matt, and thanks
Terrific
for
point,
bringing
yeah.
that up. When for those of you who don't know, worked at Forrester for many years as an
Mhm.
analyst, and we had a security and risk team of analysts who looked at, did research on practices and trends and technologies and tools and the whole gamut.
Mhm.
And there was one member of that team who I think it's fair to say, Matt, he was looking at the kind of factors that you just outlined: reputational risk, societal risk. I mean, and you know what? That poor guy. I mean, his stuff was really good, but
Mhm.
everybody was focused on tools and
Yeah,
technology. And
yeah.
the thing is that if you are not paying attention to those factors, uh, the executive team may end up in court.
Yeah.
They may end up having to pay a
Mm.
penalty because they're out of compliance in some way, or they get sued or something like that. I just wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but I just wonder how many organizations really have someone, and if they're really big, maybe a team that are really researching that and analyzing it. Tony, I wonder, your comments about, random testing and all that reminded me of the chaos monkey idea,
Mm.
which was set loose on infrastructure risk. You
Yes.
know,
Mhm.
well, maybe we need chaos monkeys for the broader, organization focusing on data
Mm.
first and foremost. It's
Yeah.
not so much a question, but I just think it's a great point, Matt. I wonder how many organizations are really set up uh, to protect themselves.
Yeah. And I
And
like that
and
you use the term research. Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
the thing about this too is people don't even talk about the worst security problems because they can't. It would be damaging
Mm.
to the reputation if they did. I
Mm.
used to teach a course on security and protecting your data and all the different ways you can do it. And before I would teach a course, I would just go through the recent news of data breaches until I finally had to stop because it was so terrifying,
Yeah.
headed by uh, a US government agency put a computer that had tons of social security numbers and personal information on people up for sale at a swap meet
Oh my
in
god.
the Middle East, where, of course, there are no bad guys in the Middle East. I just
No.
am like, ah, you know. Anyways,
Stuff
Unbelievable.
um,
happens. Stuff happens.
Yeah.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
So,
So,
John, you want to close out with a question here?
yeah, so, let you know, get getting towards the end here. Let's go back to AI. So, the idea that one of the key ideas in AI, and something we charted pretty early on, is orchestration.
Mhm.
You are using agents to acquire information, to synthesize information, to integrate information, to automate, usually operate some sort of an operational process, sometimes to gain greater insight into operations, and so forth. So I like to say that agents are promiscuous. They demand the data they need to answer questions, and they don't respect boundaries, or they don't like respecting boundaries. So
Yes.
that sort of puts us on a path, I think, to really potentially blow the doors off on any kind of access controls
Yeah.
that we see today. Some of the access controls are just a function of the way the systems are built
Mhm.
today. But we're heading into an arena where if orchestration is the top bit, the first order bit, it just seems like we're going to be throwing a lot of challenges at data architecture.
I
So well, I'm going into this. I'm back in diapers, as Tony said, and I'm really excited about AI, and I'm a developer. What's the main thing you guys would say to me to prevent me from really causing havoc? Maybe the top 2 rules or something like that.
I would say start simple, baby steps.
Yeah.
And
So
essentially
limit the data sources, limit the orchestrations.
Yeah.
limit
But
everything
yet,
when you're trying something out the first time, and limit the amount of orchestration so you can see basically, what is going to be the variability when you have this agent that you may be orchestrating, let's say, 2 or 3 different tests, some which may be deterministic, some which may be not deterministic, and observe the behavior and take. I mean, look, you're never going to be able to capture every random permutation of what can happen. But I think you have to start. You need to start simple to kind of understand it and gradually scale up, whether it be in terms of tasks, whether it be in terms of how many data sources you tie in. And by the way, one of the things we haven't talked about this whole time, you talking about the impact of AI on all this. I meant to mention this before, was that we're not only going against structured data, we're going against unstructured data. And that involves a whole bunch of ground rules, many of which we're not even aware of yet.
Yes. Yeah. And
great
what
point.
I would add, so go ahead.
No, go ahead, Matt.
And so Tony and I spoke a couple months ago at Teradata Possible, and Tony did a great job of surfacing in his research some risks. And 2 of the ones he brought up were adverse drug interactions. And he was basically saying, well, if you take 2 agents and let them interact, they'll often do things that you don't expect. And repurposing agents, right? Like taking an agent designed for one thing and using it for something else. And in my research so far, what it looks like is that agents really are not suitable for general purpose orchestration or ops. It's too much chaos. I think for now, in 2026, agents need to stay in agent jail, meaning each agent does one simple task and that's it. They don't command other agents. They're operated by orchestration code, boring old, things like Airflow or more sophisticated Kubernetes, orchestrates them and gives them instructions and gives them a simple task to do. And that's it. Because as soon as you start putting multiple agents together, you get chaos, basically. I mean, mathematical chaos, where just the uncertainty grows more and more the more these things interact. And, we've seen so many examples of agents blowing things up, usually not in super high, tightly controlled production environments. But if you put them into your critical systems without guardrails, you're just playing with fire, in my opinion.
But I mean,
That may change.
and agents are black boxes too. So I mean, you're
Yeah.
saying we're getting. Let's just throw a half a dozen black boxes into the same pen and see if anything bad happens.
What
What
can
could
go
go
wrong?
wrong? Exactly.
Right.
What about the Matt, your answer made me think of, what about the rule that if you build an agent that accesses 3 or more data sources, you must also build a sentinel that watches those interactions and
Yeah.
gives you visibility into what's going on.
Yeah.
Period.
I might
Full
go
stop.
beyond that and say that that agent should be a combination of conventional deterministic code and AI, right? We
Yeah.
had, I don't know if you know Lakshmanan, great guest if you ever have him on, but we were talking to him about this and he said, well, really, he's trying to build an agent financial company. But he said for him, that will be a little bit of AI and a lot of code because the risk is simply too high with financial data, but really any sensitive data. And the truth is that most of the data we handle these days is sensitive. Like you start social media, that seems very low stakes. It's not low stakes at all. It's like handling people's very sensitive interactions.
If you're in Minneapolis, it certainly hasn't been low stakes.
No.
Who was
all over the world. Yeah.
Who was the person you mentioned, Matt? I didn't catch the name.
Oh, Lakshmanan. So he runs a startup and he's been in the data space with Google and a number of other companies for a long time. And he wrote a book called Generative AI Design Patterns, which you both would probably enjoy reading, honestly.
Right.
And you brought up something, Matt, which to me is like nails on a blackboard and drives me crazy that I have to introduce this topic to people is that, AI gives you non-deterministic results. Well, typically that's not a good thing, and you certainly can't replace a system which gives you deterministic results with one that gives you non-deterministic results. That actually is, I think the term would be pre-broken. It's broken in advance before you even start to use it,
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us on our podcast. Rick and I had such a great time with you guys on your podcast.
Really fun.
And Rick
you, and
mentioned
by the way, you have 90,000 new fans as a result of that.
Well, thank you very much. So it's all about data, by the way.
It's about data.
It's about data.
Right.
Is a really great podcast. Recommend it to you. Guys, thanks so much for the conversation. Let's stay in touch.
For sure.
Lots to learn and lots of new opportunities and risks that we'll all be researching. So thanks very much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
See you
so
again
much.
sometime soon.
See you.